Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are. And we're glad you could join us for the webinar at ISS. We're going to talk today about the Governance and Development Policy major at ISS, and I'm glad that you are able to join us. Let me briefly introduce myself. I am Sunil Tankha. I am the co-convener of the GDP program here. And with me are two of our students, John Bosco Isahaku from Ghana and Karen Mariner from Colombia. I'll help them say hello and a few words of welcome.
Hello. Thank you very much, Sunil. My name is John Isahaku. As my lecturer has indeed mentioned, I come from Ghana, specifically in the northern part of the country. I am an NFP student. I heard about International Institute of Social Studies from my friends in Tamale. You see, the NUFEC, or the International Institute of Social Studies, is a renowned institute which focuses on development studies. So it is designed in such a way that students can benefit from scholarship from the Dutch government. And then based on my interaction with my colleagues at Tamale who had the opportunity to study in the International Institute of Social Studies of the Erasmus University in the 8th year, he made mention that the NUFEC, the NUFEC is an organization that cooperates with developing countries, in which Ghana, thank God, is a member country. That the aim of the NUFEC scholarship is to identify young potential students so that their knowledge can be upgraded in ISS. So I heard about it, and then I tried my luck. I applied for the scholarship, and then fortunately I got it. And currently I am here in the renowned Institute of Development Studies doing governance and development.
Thank you, John. Karen?
Hello, I'm Karen Mariner. I'm from Colombia, from Bogota. I'm a current GDP student here at ISS. I don't have the NOFIC scholarship, but I came here with the support of Colfuturo, which is a private public organization, and they give like scholarship for Colombians who want to go abroad and study. And as ISS is one of the universities that has a really good position on their rankings, they give us the opportunity to come here and study.
Thank you very much, Karen. So today what we're going to do is briefly introduce the whole ISS MA structure, as well as talk a little bit in detail about what constitutes the GDP program, which I remind you is Governance and Development Policy. Now, the ISS MA program lasts for about 15.5 months. You come here in September, and then you have the first term that will introduce you to the basics and the core curriculum, followed by various terms of specialization, after which you will write your research paper, and your coursework will end around June or July of the following year. Then you will write your RP, and hopefully, as most of you do, graduate in December. So for you, you will be coming in 2018 and graduating in 2019 December. Now, there are 5 majors offered at ISS, of which GDP is one. The others are agrarian, food, and environmental studies. There's economics of development. There's human rights, gender, and conflict studies, as well as social policy for development. And the key features of all of these majors is that, first of all, it's a very international experience. As you can see, we have student today from Ghana and one from Colombia, so opposite sides of the continent, of the globe. And our student body actually comes from almost all the continents. And what you will get is much more of an international experience than in many other places. And one of the other interesting aspects of our program is that there's a lot of space to carry out original research work as part of your research program. So not only do you get a good grounding in the core curriculum and in theoretical texts, but you're also given the space to develop your own ideas. As part of this, there's also a very competitive, for very few of you, but for the best students, a GDP field research grant, which will help you go into the field and collect original data. all of the courses that you will take at ISS are integrative in the sense that they combine elements of theory as well as practice. And overall, there is an important emphasis on policy, because we don't want to just talk about development in an abstract form, but actually inform the strategies that governments and civil society and even private businesses take to further developmental goals. So this is something you will come across all majors, but of course, GDP is more specifically oriented towards developing policy recommendations and policy approaches. Now, the focus, of course, is on the problems of governance. And governance here is broadly defined. It's not just an issue of government or the public sector, but rather governance processes that involve both the community as well as the private sector. So you have NGOs that are relevant to our studies, as well as the corporate sector. And we're really interested in looking at these everyday realities of people, especially the poor and the vulnerable in developing countries. In this, we pay attention to concrete governance and policy structures, the role of actors in democracy, public-private community participation and partnerships, capacity, planning systems, issues like corruption and good governance. They all come under this overall framework of GDP. And as I mentioned, for the rest of the ISS program, this too has a key theoretical approach. And our theoretical approaches are based in the fields of public policy and political economy. And of course, there's a lot of emphasis and illustration of actual policy processes, as well as how governance is practiced in different contexts throughout the world. Now, there is something that we have at ISS, which is called a specialization. In addition to the ISS MA program, which has 5 majors, you also have specializations. And in GDP, you have overlapping areas of expertise that come under the specialization, which we'll talk about a little later. But the areas of expertise principally are public policy. So here we are more concerned about the official state policy and governance processes in the public sector, but also another area of specialization and focus is on local development strategies. And here we're talking more about what are the processes at local levels where different actors, including the private sector and communities and the government, get together to create plans and approaches to improve the economic and social condition of the residents. And we also specialize, of course, in the state and the private sector together in governance processes. So what you will get in the GDP major is a good exposure to all of the different aspects of governance from different areas, including the state, the private sector, and civil society. To do the teaching, we have a core faculty. Currently, we have 6 members, and they reflect a bit the international character of the institute as well as the students. Sylvia Berg is European, Swedish, Swiss origins. Erhard Berner is German. Georgina Gomez comes from Argentina. Desmond Gasper was born in India and grew up in the United Kingdom. Peter Noringer is our Dutch faculty member, and I myself, Sunil Tankar, am from India and studied in the US and lived in Brazil. So all of us have extensive experience internationally, and we all deal with different aspects of policy and local development. Our teaching approach, as you can tell from our composition of the students as well as the faculty, is very attuned to working with diversity. And if you look at the lectures, they are very participatory. So it's not just a lecture in the sense that the professor comes and gives an hour-and-a-half long talk, but rather there's a lot of interaction between the students and the faculty members. Lots of questions are raised. There's lots of discussion. It's a two-way learning process. And when I say two-way, I mean one between the faculty and the students, but more importantly, amongst the students themselves. Because we have such a diverse population, the experiences and ideas and the values and perspectives that the students bring from all corners of the world is part of the learning process that we value so much. In terms of methodologies, we use all of the available technologies. We have web platforms, interactive ways of doing classes, not just in the classroom, but also outside. And one of the things that students really like about our program is we have lots of study visits, which includes an international trip in the spring semester. And this year we will be going to?
We went to Rome.
Oh, you've already been.
Yeah.
So Rome was the destination this year. In previous years, we've been to Berlin, to Prague. So that's one of the highlights, and it's a bonding experience, which I'll ask our student participants to talk about a little bit more later on. One of the things, of course, we leave a lot of space for is the research paper where you develop your own ideas. And that happens after July. You already start on it before, but between July and November, that's when you really immerse yourself into your own ideas, to your own projects, and your own interests. So what our teaching approach does is work with diversity, is interactive, and it leaves space for you to develop as an intellectual thinker about development policy. The major structure is divided into 4 terms. The first term, term 1A and term B, is not long, and that goes from September to about the beginning of January. And here you get introduced to the foundational issues in the theoretical and practical aspects. So you have courses in sociology, in economics, and in political science. Then there's a general course that all ISS MA students take. This course is called The Making of Development Histories, Theories, and Practices. And at the same time, as you get immersed into the thinking of development and development studies in general, there's various diagnostic tests to make sure that you get the right basis and foundation for progressing to the rest of the major program. Later on in term B, we start with the major core course. So in this case, it will be the Governance and Development Policy core course, which is Development Policies and Practice, Interest, Conflicts, and Cooperation. And you start thinking initially about your research paper program. Then in term 2 and term 3, you take more specialized courses. And now we'll discuss a little bit about the courses that you will actually take. As I mentioned, the core course for the GDP major, which is in term 1B, is Development Policies and Practices. Then in term 2, you will have some choices as to which course to take. I'd mentioned earlier that there's a stream that goes more towards public policy and a stream that goes more towards local development strategies. Now, if you're more interested in public policies, you would take courses like Policy Analysis and Design. If you're more interested in local development strategies, then there are courses like Promotion of Local Economic Development or Network Governance and Local Responses. In the third term, you specialize even further. For the public policy, for example, you might want to take Development Management and Reforms. Now, all of these courses, there's a description that's available on the website, and I encourage you to look at them before you actually come to ISS to get some idea of what we offer at this stage. Specialization, as I mentioned, is something that you do in addition to your major. Now, within the GDP major, we have 2 specializations, Public Policy and Management, in which we have courses like Policy Analysis and Design, which is compulsory if you want to specialize, but also Development Management and Reforms or Evaluation of Development Policy. For local development strategies, you have to take Network Governance and Local Responses, and then you choose between poverty, gender, and social protection or promotion of local economic development. And in many cases, you can also do both. So there's space for you to specialize even more. And then for both of these specializations, you have to, of course, write a research paper that is within the scope of the specialization. So one of the questions you might have is, should I specialize or not? You're not required to, because everybody gets an MA in Development Studies, as well as a major, one of the 5 majors that I mentioned earlier. You can optionally specialize by taking 16 course credits and a relevant RP, but you're not just restricted to the specializations under GDP. You can even look for specializations in other majors, but I wouldn't worry too much about that right now. You'll have plenty of time during orientation to decide whether or not you want to specialize, and if you want to specialize in the GDP specializations, or maybe look elsewhere for a specialization that more intimately matches your interests. Some examples of research papers look at policy processes. We've got a few up on the screen. And as you can see, our students come from Indonesia, from Brazil, from Colombia, from India, and all of them choose a policy arena that is quite different from each other. So there's a broad range of interests that we satisfy. So at this point, my formal presentation about the major is over. There is ways for you to connect with us, and I will now ask John and Karen to maybe talk a little bit more about their experiences and which specialization they took, and of course, tell us about the trip you had to Rome. Karen.
Yeah, well, I chose this program because I was really interested in the interactions between the different stakeholders. This major especially give you the opportunity to understand like the role of the private sector, but also the interactions with public sector and the organized society as well. So I came here and I'm really glad that I, I did it. All the classes are really interesting. And now I'm doing the local development strategies specialization. I'm taking network governance and local responses and promotion of local economic development. Here we have the opportunity to know how the networks at the local level impact the development of the different like municipalities or local governments.
Yeah, actually, I am from Ghana, as I already mentioned, which is a developing country. I came to ISS simply because it is a renowned institute which is focused about development. And as you all know, developing countries are lagging behind developed countries. And the Dutch government has created an opportunity for developing country students to come and learn, to acquire knowledge so that they can go home and then apply these skills or knowledge that they learn into transforming the lives of people in the developing countries. So as a student at home, I was a policy analyst. So, and then I realized that development in developing countries like Ghana, we have problems of governance. Governments lack the political will to implement policies. And what are the challenges? Why are they so? These were the questions I asked myself. And then I saw that governance and development policy will broaden my horizon so that I can acquire all the tools of government sector, private sector, and civil society sector, so that this particular experience can help me to come home and then work with the public sector or the private sector or civil society sector in order to transform the structures of governance in my country. That is why I choose governance and development policy. And really, ISS didn't disappoint me. They have renowned lecturers, and one of them is Ismail, who is handling me on policy analysis and design. And that is my interest area. I want to learn how to apply policies. And ISS is a better place that you can acquire this knowledge. And that is why I chose governance and development policy. And things are really going well. I am specializing on public policy and management. This will help me acquire experiences of how to use the tools in analyzing the policies that government of Ghana has failed to implement. So it is a better place, and we are interacting with one another as students coming from diverse backgrounds, from Africa, from Asia, from Europe, Latin America. We are all together here sharing our experiences. And all the courses we are taking for governance and development policies are gearing towards our aim. So that is why I chose GDP.
Did you guys talk about your study trip already?
No.
No. Maybe you want to explain a little bit about your study trip, Karen? Sorry.
Yes, we went to Rome in the middle of February, and we had the opportunity to went to the FAO, and also
What is the FAO?
in Spanish it's called the Organization Food
And
Agriculture Organization. I was thinking in
it's a
Spanish,
UN
sorry.
organization.
Yeah, and also we went to the World Food Program. They explaining all the challenges in the food sector and how a governance perspective, what can we do about it? And also we went to a really nice demonstration of the slow food movement in Italy. So we had like both the academic, really interesting part, but also we had another like it was not tourist, but inside of Rome trip. It was really interesting, I think.
Yeah. As Karen just mentioned, in fact, the trip was very interesting. Here in ISS, we are not just doing the talking in the classroom. We do the talking too at field trips. So we embarked on the studies trip to Rome. As you mentioned, we went to World Food Program. We met United Nations organizations, experienced workers there, and then they explained to us the measures they are taking to collect their data and how to implement it, especially in the governance perspectives. If we learn about policy problems, and then we learn about the lackadaisical attitudes of civil society organizations in holding governments accountable in executing policies. So especially in terms of food security at global level, we all know about the food politics ongoing. So we had the opportunity to interact with them, and then they told us about some of the policy initiatives that governments of respective countries in collaboration with United Nations have taken in order to fight food shortages. So it was very interesting indeed. And then here in the Netherlands, we also pay a study visit to the Dutch Parliament. They explained to us how democracy works within the Netherlands, and it was a good experience. We also took a trip to Florida, Holland, that in the Netherlands here, which is the biggest center of flowering market in the world. It was amazing. In fact, I didn't even want to come back to my school because of the experience. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Sunil, Karen, and John for the lovely presentation. We will open the floor now for some question and answers, and I already have some questions that I'm going to forward to Sunil this time in particular. There is a prospective student who is asking about the research paper, the final thesis. Number one, is it necessary? And can it be done as a project instead of a written thesis?
Okay, yes, it's definitely necessary if you want to graduate with a diploma, so it is not an optional aspect of the program. I know there are some master's programs where these kinds of research exercises are optional, but in our case, it is one of the central aspects of the program. I think it's where you learn the most in terms of applying what you have learned in class to what you really want to do with your careers. In terms of a project, yes, your research paper can be related to a project, but it has to be structured in an academic style. So it's not like a report that you might do for an NGO, for a political party. It has to follow the format of an academic research paper, which means it needs a theoretical background, it needs an analytic framework, it needs an extensive review of the literature that is relevant to the topic that you're investigating. Many of our students have in the past written papers like this that are related to some experience that they've had either in government or in the private sector or in civil society and as part of different projects. But remember that it's not a project report, it's an academic piece of writing.
Thank you, Sunil. Another question, particularly about the specialization, and I think maybe Sunil is good to answer for this question. In a private sector and state specialization, do you analyze how to improve the relations and the corresponsibility between state and private sector, between companies, multinational companies, and so on?
Okay.
Yeah.
So there isn't a specialization in the private sector and state. There are two specializations. The specializations are public policy and management and local development strategies. Now, in both, the relation between state and civil society or state and the private sector are studied. So, for example, when you do public policy and management, You might want to study things like privatization, where the state and the private sector interact to form, to deliver a service such as electric power or water. Similarly, in local development strategies, you might want to talk about networks or clusters of firms and how state policy might interact with private sector interests and strategies in order to create a development program for a particular area. So we definitely look at that in both specializations that we have.
Right. Thank you, Sunil. These are the questions for the students. Some of them want to know if there's any extracurricular activities that students can participate in. So maybe Karen first, you can answer your experience.
We have a lot, like all the time you have something to do here. Like sometimes you need to decide like, oh, do I want to go to this activity or this activity? Because it's amazing. Like we this year we have different committees. We have a social committee, a sports committee, international committee. So for example, on Sundays, we can go to Blinkers, which is like a sports space.
Yeah.
And actually, yesterday we started our intermajor tournament, so we can play badminton, football, ping pong, volleyball, basketball, everything you want. And
even yoga classes, I hear.
Yeah, we have yoga classes. The international committee is preparing all the time different like coffee talks, and we have like movie nights and parties also. Where are you?
Aside from that, there are a lot of activities that is ongoing here, extracurricular activities. I think every blessed day we are welcoming renowned guest speakers from all over the world, talking to us about issues of migration, talking to us about issues of refugee crisis, what is all over. So there are a lot of activities that sometimes you even ask yourself, which one should I choose to go and which one should I not? So a lot with sports, as you mentioned, and then we also have a lot of social gatherings here where Indonesians have their parties, Indians are celebrating their Hindus party and all that. Africans come together. So the activities are many. Sometimes you get yourself confused as to which one to prioritize and which one not. Yeah.
Thank you, John and Karen. Another question, but this time to Sunil. What kind of background do you look for students who are interested to participate in the GDP program?
Well, the main important background is intellectual curiosity. We don't have a preference for someone who's from the public sector or from the private sector or from civil society. You're all welcome. The issue is, are you interested in governance processes? Are you interested in policy issues? Or are you interested in local or development strategies in general? So in the sense that if you think, well, I've had my experience mostly in the private sector, maybe it's not the place for me, that's not true. What we want you to be is intellectually curious about the topics of GDP. And so if you are that kind of interested person, you're welcome here.
Thank you, Sunil. A question for the students. How do you find living in the Netherlands? Are there any cultural shocks that you face? So
okay,
maybe John, you can go first.
So, I think I can start. In fact, Netherlands is an amazing country. In this country, there is too much freedom. You can roam at any time. Since I came here, I've never had any incident of criminality or arrest or fighting. The country is peaceful. The only challenge maybe I face here is the weather. The weather is very cold. That's the only, but the country is amazing. They respect people from different backgrounds, irrespective of your skin color. There's no restriction here. So in fact, it's a nice place to be there. They respect people a lot, and they interact with people a lot. So it's a nice place, Netherlands. Since I came here, I've never faced any challenge.
And I agree. Like The Hague is a beautiful city. and you have Amsterdam and Rotterdam really nearby, so you can just travel during the weekends, and the city is pretty secure. You will get used to use your bike all the time, and then you will love it. But yeah, the cold is a problem, but no, the weather is getting better, so.
Okay, thank you, Karen and John. Another question for Sunil this time. Your career options after graduating from ISS, particularly for the GDP major. What does student normally do after that?
Okay. Well, it depends on what you were doing before you came here. Many of you are working already, maybe in government or in civil society organization or an NGO. And a lot of our students take leave of absence to pursue the degree when they come here. So they finish their coursework and go back to their previous employment. Others will, of course, look for something new and different. A good number of our exceptional students decide to go on for a PhD or a doctorate in development studies in universities in Europe at ISS or in North America or back in their home countries. Others will look for employment and find it in the civil society or NGO sector in the Netherlands or in Europe or back in home. And a few of these students have also been placed in agencies like the United Nations or the World Bank. Most of these students are therefore in more of the public sector community side of the employment market, but there are also a few students who have gone on to work in the private sector. There are a number of students who choose to extend their stay in the Netherlands. There's a search visa, which is after you graduate, you're allowed to stay in the Netherlands and try to find some practical training work. And therefore, that's another option that many of our students decide to avail of. And so really, once you come to ISS, you have most of the world open to you in terms of opportunities. One of the other things I will mention about ISS is that because you're in close interaction with people from all over the world, maybe you go to some other country completely because of romantic interests, and that also happens. So, be open. There's all kinds of opportunities available in the Netherlands, in the rest of the world, in your home country. So there's really no real focus on one kind of post-graduation work.
Thank you, Sunil, for the answer. Another question for you, Sunil, particularly. What is the role of the convener? Because there are two co-conveners, and then there's the normal, in the slide, there is the normal lectures, and they want to know what is the role of the conveners.
The convener is basically, or in this case, we have two co-conveners. These are the organizers of the major. So all of the logistical, bureaucratic, and programmatic issues are taken care of by the convener. We're also responsible for making sure that the different classes are offered in a way that address all of the learning objectives of the major. So we work closely with the teaching team, the core teaching staff, whom I have mentioned, in terms of organizing the classes, and we also serve as a point of contact for the students if they have issues related to their academic, or in many cases, their lives related to ISS in a broader sense. So the conveners are basically the first point of contact for academic issues in the major, and in the background, we are the ones that are organizing and running the major to make sure everything is delivered smoothly and addresses the objectives of our program.
Thank you, Sunil. Probably the last questions to the students. Maybe you want to explain about the class environment and the teaching method of in the GDP program. Karen, you want to go first?
Yeah. Our batch, I think in our class, the core course, we were about like 24. We are this year in GDP 24 students. From all over the world, we have people from Indonesia, Ecuador, Ghana, Zambia, Tanzania, Malawi, India. I'm from Colombia. And yeah, it's a really like cultural, it's really diverse in terms of culture, but that gives you the opportunity to see the same problems with different perspectives. So you have a topic, and then you have different ways of seeing because of our experience and our cultures. So it's really interesting to learn not only from a theoretical way, but also from the experience from all over the world. And also, as we were saying before, most of the classes have study trips. So you go to the field, I have the possibility to see the things in practice, to learn what is happening in the real life.
I think, as my colleague has just mentioned, there are different teaching approaches or techniques used in ISS, especially in GDP. We are engaged in participatory lecture, whereby lecturers give you the freedom to ask them questions for clarifications. When they teach and you don't understand anything, you can chip in and give your inputs and ask questions for clarification, which we describe as participatory lecture. We have group work. They normally give us group work, and then we do and put us into, let's say, groups of 4 or groups of 5 for you to work around a particular team, trying to research, finding answers to a particular problem or question. Then we also use study trips methods, as he mentioned. When they teach you something theory, they take you to the field to have a practical feel of what you learn in the classroom. We also have take-home assignment, where they give you a question for you to go home, and then you can use about a period of 4 or 3 weeks to research into the area and come out with your own understanding and put it into a written form for grading. So there are a lot of teaching techniques used here, especially in GDP. We also use simulation games, where you practice, real life roundtable negotiations. For instance, this year we did a simulation game on cocoa case study, and it was very interesting. I was representing the Ministry of Agriculture in Ghana, where I tried to convince buyers or other sectors that Ghana produce better quality cocoa, so they have to always come and do business with that. This particular one gave us a real insight of how to do roundtable negotiations, and I think after completing here, it will help me a lot in my the further career. Yeah, so in fact, it's amazing.
Thank you, John, for insight. Last question to Sunil. Now, for the GDP specialization, can I change my mind once I have chosen one specialization? Do I have the option to choose the other one if I didn't like the specialization that I've chosen?
So GDP is a major,
Yeah,
and within that, you can change your majors, but only till the first term 1A, because term 1B you start the core program for the major, and so every major has its own core course, so you can't change in term 2, for example, because you wouldn't have taken the core course for the other major. So in the first few weeks, some of our students do change based on when they get to know more about what's in the course, or maybe they clarify and crystallize some of the ideas they had. Maybe they're torn between 2 programs and they discuss with other students, especially the previous year's batch, which is also there till November. So there's some interaction with the previous batch. And based on that, we do have this space for changing the major up to about term 1A, let's say. Again, term 1B, once you start, if you've missed the core course, then of course it'll be difficult, if not impossible, for you to change your major. In terms of the specializations, like PPM or LDS, that of course you can do much later, because those courses are in term 2 and term 3. So you do have time more time to decide on what you want to specialize, if you want to specialize.
Okay, thank you, Sunil. One last question just came up, and I will make this the last question. About internship. The student allowed to do their internship while doing their major at ISS? And do you help them with finding an internship placement?
There are some students who do internships. Most of them find it on their own initiative because the program itself is demanding in the academic sense and, as Karen and John mentioned, in the social sense. So you obviously have to prioritize academics and social interaction, so which leaves less time for internships. However, we have had in the past students who have done internships in the summer that has also developed into their research papers. So there's a lot of different options. There isn't a program specifically within ISS or in the majors to help get these internships. A lot of times it's because the student has a particular interest in a particular organization that has a base in the Netherlands or has some kind of project that would be satisfied through their stay in the Netherlands. And in that case, we help the student organize himself or herself to take full advantage of the opportunities. But we do not encourage taking on too much because the academic pressures are substantial. And of course, we want you to have enough time to have a good social life. So some students do internships, but it's not very, very common.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sunil, Karen, and John, for this lovely webinar session about the GDP program. Before we complete this program, the webinar session, any last words? Maybe we'll start with the students first. Any last word that can help our viewer to, anything that you want to say?
Yeah, what I want to say is that ISS is a renowned Institute of Development Studies Center. If you have chosen ISS, know that you have chosen one of the best institutions in the world. Our checks here shows that it is ranked 59th position in the world. Look at all the universities in the world. The school has ranked 59th position. So this shows that it is an organization with high repute. So I would like to tell you that you should prepare yourself very well and come. As my lecturer or my convener has just said, it is a very intensive program. Where there is competition, so you have to prepare very well and come. Again, be mindful of the weather. At least just so that when you are coming, know that the winter is very cold. So you have to prepare your mind psychologically before coming to the Netherlands. So ISS is the best place for you to come, and you will never regret it.
Karen?
Yeah, I think but yeah, just come here. It's an amazing experience. You won't regret it. The program is really, really good.
Well, we have the testimonials from our students. I would, of course, encourage you to think well about what your intellectual and career interests are, and if they are, in fact, within this overall field of development studies, then I encourage you to come to ISS. If within development studies, you're more interested in policy processes and development strategies, then I encourage you to major in GDP. And notwithstanding the weather, there are certain other fringe benefits to coming to the Netherlands, which is that there are many short flights to sunnier places where you can take advantage of your study breaks. But I will close by saying that this is a welcoming place, and no matter what your background is or what your philosophies are, you will find a place that is stimulating and open to discussions, not just about development studies, but about the forms that societies should take in general. And I think so far we have managed to do this very well, even in difficult global times, and we hope to continue to do that in the future.
And one last thing I would like to add is that I would like to encourage those of you who cannot self-finance yourself, those of you who applied for scholarship, if you miss it, continue trying. Don't give up. at least you one day get it, because a huge number of students normally apply for it, and then the best ones are always selected. So keep on trying. There's no harm in trying. When you miss it this year, try ISS and try the scholarship again the following year. Hopefully you will be one of them. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for your time. And with that, we will conclude our webinar session on the GDP major.
Thank you for ending.